Welcome to the Underdog Wide Receiver Rankings Debate Show. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS, and I'm here with the man in charge of the rankings at Stochastic. He does all of our best ball rankings, Matt Gajewski. You can find him on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. You can see that how that is spelled on his screen there, on under his face there. You can see how to spell Matt Gajewski. Check him out if you haven't already. We're going to be debating Matt's wide receiver rankings. They are pretty different from the field in some spots. So that's always fun to see when you can find those big differences from the field. By the way, guys, while you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. If you haven't yet signed up for Underdog, speaking of those rankings that Matt does, he works really hard on them. You can get those when you sign up at Underdog. You're going to get your first deposit matched up to $100, and you're going to get our whole best ball package for free. That includes Matt's rankings for every site, his best ball rankings, and it in CSV form. You can download it directly from the Stochastic page, upload it onto Underdog. So check that out if you haven't already. You can get you get that first deposit match most places, but you don't get our package. It's a $40 value, our best ball package, and in my opinion, worth more than $40. So if you haven't yet signed up at Underdog, make sure you use the link in the description of this video when you sign up so that you can get our best ball package along with that first deposit match up to $100. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Been really enjoying these conversations. I'm excited to talk about wide receiver. We actually have some sort of fresh news with DeAndre Hopkins landing recently.
Yep.
And yeah, this is one of the most fun positions to talk about, especially in today's climate.
Yeah, I actually added DeAndre Hopkins to my spreadsheet today, even though you're actually not that far from ADP right now. I still think that it's an interesting discussion point. So we'll talk about, where we think he should be in the rankings. I've already made a spreadsheet of the biggest places where you are different from the field, and I'm going to throw that up on the screen so that people can see those as well. Let me throw that up there now. All right, so let's start here. So this is what you're seeing here is Matt's actual rankings, and this is the page I'm talking about. You're going to get this access to this package if you use our link when you sign up. You can just click this CSV button. It'll automatically download Matt's CSV rankings, and then you can upload those directly onto Underdog. And then I made this little spreadsheet so we can see the biggest differences for you, and not really any huge differences for you at the top. You do have Tyreek Hill ranked ahead of Cooper Kupp. You have him 3rd overall. You have Cooper Kupp 5th overall. It's really not that different from ADP, but do you think there's any significant reason that you like Tyreek Hill better than the field here, or is that just, whatever? It's kind of a coin flip there.
Yeah, I don't think that's too different. Seen it kind of flip flop in ADP as well on certain sites. I have no issues if you want to take Cooper Kupp over Tyreek Hill. It's pretty razor thin here. At the end of the day, Cooper Kupp, he's a little bit older in his career, coming off an injury, worse offense, and Miami, they've got awesome win total, young QB. Tyreek Hill still in the prime of his career. Think you can split hairs with Tyreek Hill at the top, but very, very close.
Yeah, and as we can see in your projections here, you actually put your point projections here as well. Very close, within 7 or 8 points of each other here. Really close in terms of projection between Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp. I wonder if part of the reason that the field drafts Kupp ahead of Hill is concerns over like maybe legal issues with Tyreek Hill. I think he slapped somebody. There's at least a little bit of concern with Hill that he's going to be suspended a few games potentially. And also I think it might be partially like the QB play, like maybe he's reliant on Tua, but I think that's true of Kupp also. So that's probably not a real reason to not draft Tyreek Hill. But I think that some people have this impression that maybe if Tua gets one more concussion, he's just going to retire. Like, and who knows if that is the case. But maybe there's some reason that people have
hearing from the armchair doctors.
Yeah, I mean it's just it's one of those things that I think people factor in maybe more than they should, because I think that Matthew Stafford is probably more at risk of like taking one hit and retiring than Tua. But I mean, none of us know anything, and he just gotta, go with your projection here, and really you're not that far different between those two. Let's move on to some more interesting ones, because you have a lot of really interesting like differences from the field, and I'd love to hear them, starting with Deebo Samuel. So we're going to go through first some wide receivers that you're more bullish on than the field, and then we'll talk about some that you're more bearish on than the field. You are bullish on Deebo Samuel. You have him as your wide receiver 12, ranked 23rd overall. The field is drafting him 35th overall as the wide receiver 18. What are you seeing that you like about Deebo Samuel this year?
Yeah, this is one I think that's going to continue to change. I do the risers and fallers column every Monday and video as well, if you'd like to check that up. He's been a player that's screaming up draft boards recently. Some of our competitors, who shall not be named, of course, on this stream, have been hyping up Deebo Samuel as well this offseason. So it was a little surprising to me he was going as low as he was. And basically, with Deebo Samuel, you have a player locked in, number one target on his team. There is some target competition with Ayuk and Kittle, but I think we've seen Deebo is the focal point of the offense, really, regardless of the complexion of the offense as a whole. We've even seen him play, the running back position with a decent amount of touchdown equity there. Brock Purdy, I think, is a quarterback upgrade, and it appears he's going to be all systems go for week 1. And he also changes the complexion of the offense. If you have a player like Trey Lance starting, you're looking at more rushing attempts theoretically with a dual threat quarterback compared to Brock Purdy, who's your standard pocket passer. Don't want to sell him short. He is a little mobile, but I mean, pass rate's going to be higher with Brock Purdy under center. And then it comes down to alternatives. Once you get beyond Deebo Samuel, at least in our rankings, you're looking at players that are either unproven or looking more like number 2s on their team. Players like T. Higgins and Devontae Smith, who I'm sure we'll get into. I'm a little lower on them. But yeah, at the end of the day, Deebo, excellent role. He's going to be the number 1 receiver in San Francisco in an elite offense.
Do you have any concerns about like with Christian McCaffrey there? Maybe he takes away like certainly some of that rushing upside, maybe a little bit of just like share in general, like share of the offense. Any concerns there that maybe Deebo is going to see a lesser role with Christian McCaffrey there, and any Elijah Mitchell healthy presumably this year?
No, if anything, I think it helps. Wide receiver snaps are more valuable than running back snaps. So with those guys, Deebo should be playing more his actual role, which is more valuable for fantasy anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So you're bullish on Deebo. Looks like one spot where maybe the field is missing out on a wide receiver with a lot of upside here. Let's move on. Christian Kirk, you have ranked as your wide receiver 16. Pretty drastic here. You have him as your wide receiver 16, ranked 31st overall. The field drafting Christian Kirk 50th overall at wide receiver 27. I think we can throw in, as long as we're talking about Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, you also have lower than Christian Kirk. He's going quite a bit ahead of Christian Kirk in drafts. What is your take on this wide receiver room in general? And I guess as long as we're talking about the wide receiver room in general, Zay Jones is also an outlier for you. So you're a little bit lower on Calvin Ridley, a little bit higher on Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones, who you have as your 96th overall pick. He's going 122nd overall. You have him as a wide receiver 49. The field has him as a wide receiver 57. So what is it that you think that you like about Kirk and Zay Jones a little bit more than the field?
I actually am surprised Zay Jones comes in above the field. He's a player I actually don't like, but this must be a projection thing. I'll take a look on the back end and see what it is with him. But
okay.
I could talk to you about Ridley and Kirk first off, because this is I think a really interesting topic, and it's one that's actually been getting closer in our rankings as well. I think people just walked into the season assuming Ridley was going to be the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville. And if I was a betting man, I would think I'd be willing to lay like minus 110 or something that is the case, but definitely wouldn't bet Ridley if he was like minus 200 or something. All that to say, Ridley basically hasn't played in 2 years now. Even before the suspension, played, I believe it was somewhere either 5 or 7 games. I don't have that figure in front of me. So now we're talking about a receiver who's approaching age 30, who hasn't played in almost 2 seasons, versus Christian Kirk, who's a player that actually did have really good efficiency metrics last year. Strong target share is the number 1 on that team. So there's a little bit of nuance, I think, to this projection. If you just go and run with Ridley's previous career efficiencies, he's going to project a little ahead of Kirk. But if you kind of normalize these two and give them, right now I have them projected for the same role, 92% of the routes. And then if you look at targets per route rate, I have that both at 21%, which is a little high. You get Kirk projecting slightly ahead. So I would kind of rank this as Kirk is the safer bet, but Ridley has higher upside just based on his career efficiency if you think he can get back to that. So I'm willing to hear arguments on both sides, but I'm trying to play this a little safe. And when you give them similar efficiency metrics, you end up with Kirk slightly ahead in the rankings. But again, if you think Ridley is still that 27-year-old prime receiver form, no issues with drafting him ahead of Kirk.
Yeah, and it seems like you're not actually that far off the field on Calvin Ridley. He's going to like 32, 33 overall. You have him 36th overall. So it's more that you're bullish on Kirk than it is that you're bearish on Ridley. And similarly, your rankings would suggest that you're bullish on Zay Jones, but it sounds like you're not actually that bullish on him despite the ranking.
So I think that's just a function. I'm looking at it right now. Jacksonville's going to be better this year. Their win total's higher. Their rush rate is really low over expectation. This is a team that's throwing the ball, and Trevor Lawrence has ascended efficiency-wise in every one of his NFL seasons. You'd presume that to be the case when you add in another talented receiver like Calvin Ridley. So we have this as a pretty bullish overall passing attack. And Zay Jones, we have him at 82% of the routes right now. You look at the players behind him. We're talking about Jamal Agnew. He's basically a special teamer. Parker Washington's a rookie out of Penn State. And then, I mean, we get deeper. We're talking about practice squad guys, Tim Jones, Seth Williams, Kevin Austin. This roster doesn't have anybody who's going to play legitimate snaps behind Zay Jones. So really, I think it's just, okay, we gave him a good route share in a good offense. He's going to project decent. With that said, I'm still a little surprised. We're almost, like 8 spots ahead of him in the wide receiver ranks. So that's a little surprising.
Yeah, that's I guess the field that just sees him as like, well, maybe he's not going to be a factor now that they have Calvin Ridley. So I think maybe the field is kind of writing him off a little bit, whereas you're still projecting for a fair bit of volume, it sounds like, as the wide receiver 3.
And yeah, where is he in our ranks? I want to see like him versus Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, so you have Zay Jones 96th in our ranks. You have Tyler Boyd 109th in our ranks.
Yeah, overall. They're pretty close. Jones at wide receiver 48, Boyd at 52. In my mind, I view them as kind of the same player. All right, you have like a reliable, almost every down receiver as the number 3 in a prolific passing attack. Now, Cincinnati's a little bit better, but I think you can also pencil in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for a larger combined target share than you can with Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think that is a fair assessment of the situation. All right. The next one, DeAndre Hopkins. I didn't put him in here because you're not actually that far off from the field on DeAndre Hopkins. I'm a lot lower on him than the field is, and you're a little bit higher on him. So I kind of want to hear you out on DeAndre Hopkins. You have him as the wide receiver 22, 41st overall. He's actually risen in the ranks. His ADP has risen on Underdog. I thought for sure after he landed on the Titans that was going to drop, and I rank him quite a bit lower than where the field has him. So what is it that you like about DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee?
It's not anything like I individually like about him. I just basically plugged him into the Tennessee offense. So I'm kind of going to give you like the top-down perspective of looking at DeAndre Hopkins. The Titans win total didn't change whatsoever. So things like touchdown expectation, yardage expectation, even, like pass and run rate aren't generally affected here because DeAndre Hopkins just flat out, this is in my opinion, this is Sportsbook's opinions. He's not a needle mover for the Titans. Like they're not projected to do any better with or without him in the offense. With that said, you still drop him into an offense where I have Ryan Tannehill and Will Levis projected each to play 50% of the snaps this year in an offense that's really run heavy. And you still get a pretty good projection based on his efficiency metrics if he plays a full season, which I mean that's what we're betting on basically with all these players. We're looking for a ceiling. Right. So he ends up coming out just ahead of 1,000 yards, which I think is pretty reasonable. He's not projected for like 1,400 or something crazy. And from there, we have him in a range where there's questions with most of the other receivers. In the rankings, he comes in just ahead of Terry McLaurin. And I think it's a similar situation. You've got a bad offense with no settled quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins is kind of like the last receiver if you look at that area where we're really comfortable drafting players. He's like just behind players like Jerry Jeudy, the Jacksonville receivers, Devontae Smith, and then he's just ahead of players like Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson, players like that, where there are concerns. So if you break this down kind of into tiers, DeAndre Hopkins is almost like the head of this tier that starts to have concerns.
Okay, so you'd put him in more like in the tier with Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson, not in the tier that has Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy?
I would personally, yes. I think you and I are pretty in line here. He just projects honestly better than I thought he would, given the parameters around Tennessee's offense. And they still have an 8-win total, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting spot because they are so, like, last year they didn't pass at a very high rate. Their pass rate over expectation was like near the bottom of the league. But
you think you remember the Malik Willis game?
Well, that's a good point. I did not factor that in probably as much as I should have, because he just was a dumpster fire.
I mean, did they even pass 10 times in that game?
I don't think they did. Yeah,
I don't think they did either. That was a wild game.
Yeah, so maybe that factors in. Maybe I didn't factor that in enough when looking at their pass rate. I still don't think they're going to have like a huge pass rate, but maybe it does go up.
We have them like bottom 5.
Okay, so still not expecting a ton from the pass game, but you're expecting so you're expecting DeAndre Hopkins to be the pretty clear wide receiver 1, like not like a 1A 1B situation. Like, do you think it's a gap? Like he's the 1, Treylon Burks the 2?
Have them similar percent of the routes, but better efficiency for Hopkins for sure. Burks obviously is sophomore now, little ways to go, and he dropped quite a bit in our ranks. Depending on your platform, you're going to find him behind names like Kadarius Toney. On Underdog specifically, we now have him as wide receiver 39, whereas I believe prior to the change, he was wide receiver 32. So just kind of airdropping DeAndre Hopkins into the offense, drop Burks about 8 spots in our wide receiver rankings. So not terrible for Burks. He's a player I'd wait on right now, but I think this is one that could overcorrect too far the opposite direction, if that makes sense.
Yep, I think that is the perfect analysis. Like right now, I'm not really drafting a ton of Burks, but I've drafted him a few times. When I see him fall to like pick 85 or so, then I'm like, all right, this is where I'm gonna buy in on Treylon Burks. I think right now there's just a lot of volatility in where he falls in drafts, so maybe just pick your spots with him. All right, I think we've gone over that situation well enough. Brandon Cook's an interesting one because you have him as your wide receiver 32. You have him 62nd overall. He's going 84th overall as the wide receiver 43. So you're quite a bit higher than the field on Brandon Cooks. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, this is the question that we talked about with Dak Prescott. Yeah. All right, you have Dak Prescott ranked QB 11 or whatever it is now. How do you have Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup so low? Like something doesn't compute. Either you have Dak Prescott too high or you have Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup too low. CeeDee Lamb, relatively unaffected. He's basically a top 10 receiver. And we have this different split. Like we have Dak Prescott projected a little under the field and Brandon Cooks a little over the field. So I think this is a pretty good opportunity to take a player right now who's still talented, unless you think Michael Gallup overtakes him or something like that. But right now, Brandon Cooks, even in his elder years, still pretty efficient. And we saw him operate as a clear number 1 in Houston. He's not going to have to do that anymore. There's going to be more attention around players like CeeDee Lamb. And with this said, Brandon Cooks still can slide into this offense and take on a pretty good target share without affecting CeeDee Lamb because you lost Dalton Schultz. There's actually a decent amount of targets up for grabs here. And Dallas doesn't really have a locked-in tight end replacement. They've got 3 or 4 guys, I think, that might play the role. Yeah. But all that to say, Cooks is more talented than whoever that would be.
And I should say, you have Michael Gallup pretty high, and I think you're like right with maybe slightly above the field on CD Lamb as well. But you have Michael Gallup as your wide receiver 57, going 115 overall in our ranks. The field draft you Michael Gallup at 135. So you just think there are targets to be had in Dallas with the Dalton Schultz leaving, and you think that those can be gobbled up by Cooks and Gallup essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to another wide receiver room. And really, you're not that far off the field on Rashad Bateman, but I think it's kind of an interesting wide receiver room to talk about in general. So you have Rashad Bateman as your wide receiver 43. He's going as wide receiver 45. Not a huge difference. You have him 79th overall. He's going 88th overall. And then you also have, you're way lower than the field on Odell Beckham, who you have as your wide receiver 64. The field has him as the wide receiver 53. You have him 133 overall. The field has him wide receiver 111. And then Zay Flowers, I believe you're pretty close to the field on Zay Flowers. Yeah, in the 90s. I think you're pretty close there. So how do you see this wide receiver room breaking down? Why do you think that you are higher than the field on Bateman and lower on Odell Beckham?
Yeah, really volatile position here for Baltimore, as you know. But to break it down, I guess it starts with the offense as a whole and what you think Todd Monken's going to do at OC and what you think adding Beckham and Flowers does to the offense as a whole. So right away, you're kind of working with a tricky pass rate situation. I'm anticipating them being a little pass heavier, but with Lamar under center, I still think the run game is going to be the focal point of the offense. But so that's kind of a point of tension there. Depending on how much you think they throw, maybe you want to bump these receivers. From there, it's who plays what role. Bateman has struggled to stay healthy in the NFL, but he's actually been really good when he's on the field. He has some solid efficiency metrics. Zay Flowers is an incoming rookie. He has high draft capital, first-round draft capital. So he's a player you would assume walks into a starting role, whether he's the number 1, 2, or 3, that's up for debate. And then you have Beckham, who's been highly efficient throughout his career, but injuries have affected him, and he hasn't been the same player lately. And then you have him removed from football for a considerable amount of time right now. So what does he come back and look like? I think the safest bet here is to take Bateman, who's still young and efficient, assuming he's healthy, which I'm going to assume right now. Yep. Second, Flowers, the explosive rookie, just because of what they have invested in him. And then third, Beckham. That would be an assumption he gets back to his full health and efficiency that he showed previously in his career. But again, it's been like 3 or 4 seasons since we actually saw like legit game-changing Odell Beckham.
Do you think that you could see your rankings changing as we get closer to the season, depending on camp reports? Because right now it's just such a murky situation overall.
Yeah,
this might be one. Yeah.
Don't you think? Would you think this is like a top 3 most volatile wide receiver offense right now?
Yeah, I would think so. Like they're all like they go pretty close to each other in drafts, but I think, because we got Bateman off of the Liz Frank injury, we have Beckham was an ACL, I forget what it was exactly, but he's had
a bunch of in the Super Bowl.
Bunch of serious injuries the past few years, and then we have the rookie and Zay Flowers. So like, there's just such an unknown situation. I'm buying in, like I'm buying a lot, but like I do different things in different drafts. Like typically I take Bateman over Flowers. Occasionally I'll take Flowers over Bateman just because I don't want to have only Bateman and no Flowers. I think I agree with you. It's one of the most volatile situations, and I think that it's one that I'm going to be paying close attention to the news we get out of camp, who's practicing, who's not practicing, who looks good, etc. I think I'm actually going to be paying closer attention than I do to most teams to camp reports.
Agreed, 100%. Good way to treat this.
Next up, here's a pretty big gap for you. You have Rondale Moore as your wide receiver 47. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 60 overall. You have Rondale Moore 88th overall in your rankings. He's going 129th overall. So tell me what you like about Rondale Moore here.
He's the clear number 2, if not potentially the number 1 in this offense. You have basically just Marquise Brown ahead of him and no real wide receiver 3. I think right now, if you were a betting man, you'd probably think Dortch plays that role, but Zach Pascal's on the team. Basically, this team's going to be awful. They're going to throw the ball a ton, and you essentially have like glorified slot receiver Rondale Moore. So there should be a lot of PPR volume for him. And if you look back to last year, like Greg Dortch was a guy we were playing a lot in DFS as a value guy near the stone minimum. And he had a pretty good season considering this is an undrafted guy. And Rondale Moore, assuming health, should come right in and play this role. So right away, I think it just comes down to alternatives. You've got an every down receiver who's going to operate in the slot for Arizona, who they have a lot invested in. So assuming health, I think he's a pretty good bet right now.
I think so. I've drafted. I think he might be my most drafted wide receiver. If not, he's like top 3 for me. So I'm right there with you with Rondale Moore. It's interesting. I've never heard it suggested that he could become the wide receiver 1 over Marquise Brown. You think without injury that could happen?
I think it could happen. I don't think it's likely, but I
Okay.
think it could happen.
I think Greg Dortch. So you have him down at 243 in your rankings. But is he somebody that you'd be willing to target in drafts if you don't have Rondale Moore, or would you ever draft him on a team where you already have Rondale Moore?
Yeah, he's so cheap. I don't think it matters too much.
Okay, yeah, he's somebody that I've been drafting in last rounds occasionally. As you said, just like the target share when Rondale Moore was out was so good for Greg Dortch, and then after Rondale Moore came in, he right away got like 10 targets in one of his first games back after an absence. So just feels like the targets are there for whoever is playing that role for Arizona. So I like that one quite a bit. Good to see that you are bullish there because yeah, I've been drafting a ton of Rondale Moore.
Me too,
Right.
man.
We talked about Zay Jones already. Jacoby Myers, you have as your wide receiver 51. He's going as a wide receiver 58. You have him, and actually, we can talk about Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow. I think that you're close to the field on Devontae Adams, but these secondary, tertiary receivers for the Raiders. Again, you have Jacoby Myers as your wide receiver 51, 101st overall in your rankings. He's going 125th overall at wide receiver 58. Hunter Renfrow, you're also pretty bullish on. You have him as the wide receiver 67. He's going as a wide receiver 81. You have him 141st in your rankings. He's going as the 187th. What is it that you like about these secondary, tertiary Raiders receivers?
I think there's a couple reasons for the difference. I think I'm a little more optimistic than maybe the field is that Garoppolo is going to play the whole year. I know he's dealing with an injury right now, but maybe people are factoring in, okay, Garoppolo sits out part of the time and they have to go to like Brian Hoyer or something. If we get that news, I could tell you right away all of these Raiders receivers are going to drop. But from there, Renfro's the guy I really want to highlight here. I'm not sure why people are so low. He was the subject to some trade rumors, some cut rumors, but it hasn't happened. And he's going to play this high percentage slot role in Vegas. And he's actually played it really well through the course of his career. Last year, he dealt with injury. But I mean, this is a guy that was winning people best ball tournaments 2 years ago. And now it's as if he's a practice squad level player. I think
Right.
it's gone too far on Hunter Renfrow. And he's one of my favorite late receivers to draft right now. And sorry, you can go ahead, Neil. You look like you want to add something.
No, I'm 100% with you on Renfrow. He's also right up there as one of my most drafted wide receivers. I do want to ask you, do you have any concerns about Jacoby Myers taking that slot role from Hunter Renfrow? And like maybe he just doesn't have the same role.
So I think if you're just configuring the Patriots, Myers' old team, if you're configuring the Raiders offense, Renfrow kind of has to be your slot guy. Like Adams is a boundary receiver. Myers has a different complexion than Renfrow. And you don't really have another slot guy on this roster. I mean, you've got like Keelan Cole, I guess, could do it. Renfro's much better than him. Dorsett's just a field stretcher. And you've got some special teamers. So it's like, I think if you were to just draw this up, you would want Myers in the boundary over Renfrow. But again, I'm not a coach. I'm not 100% confident they do that.
But even if they, don't do it exactly how you have it, I mean, he's a pretty clear wide receiver 3 here, right?
Yeah, do you think there's a chance he could be the 2 over Myers?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think that Myers, so everything that I've read, Myers is actually was better last year than I thought he was. So that makes me a little bit more hesitant to say that. But I see that in the range of outcomes. Hunter Renfrow was really good 2 years ago. And then he was, pretty injury riddled season last year, didn't really have as good of a year. So I think he's being slept on a little bit. But yeah, I think that it's within the range of outcomes that Renfrow overtakes Jacoby Myers. But as I said, I mean, you like both these guys. They both look good. It seems like they just have pretty clear, it's pretty clear that they're going to be the wide receivers 2 and 3, regardless of who you see as a 2 and 3, right? Like there's nobody really competing for those spots.
I think so. And you remove Waller from the offense. I know they drafted Michael Mayer really high, but we're still talking about a rookie tight end who's also, like Waller was a flex, big slot type tight end. Michael Mayer's not that. He's a traditional 2-way tight end, actually not athletic at all, turns out. I loved him at Notre Dame, but he's not going to play the same receiving role that Waller did.
Yeah. So a lot to like about these receivers. I'm with you. I've actually, I think that early on I didn't draft a ton of Jacoby Myers, but more recently I've been more and more in on Jacoby Myers. So good to see that you're drafting these receivers as well. We already talked about Michael Gallup. DJ Chark, another one. So you have him as your wide receiver 59. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 69. You have DJ Chark 121st overall. He's going 158th overall. Another one of my top exposed receivers. Just the field seems to be sleeping on him a little bit too much. To me, it's a pretty jumbled room there in Carolina. I don't know who is going to end up being the wide receiver one between Chark, Mingo, and washed Adam Thielen. But I have been generally not drafting Thielen and drafting a lot of both Chark and Mingo. What do you like about Chark here?
He might be the most proven receiver in this room, which you used the perfect word for Adam Thielen in washed. And Adam Thielen played in a pretty good offense. I know he did deal with some injuries. He's had high ankle issues for a while now. But this is a guy past age 30. If you look at yards per route run, it's a steady decline for Adam Thielen year over year, going back about 4 or 5 years now. And do we really think, and as much as I love Bryce Young, do we really think him going from Kirk Cousins in one of the pass heaviest offenses in the NFL to Carolina is really going to correct that negative trend in yards per route run?
Right.
I'm not confident. It doesn't sound like you are either. So similar to you, I'm making bets on Chark and Mingo. When you look at like Mingo specifically, we're talking about a rookie receiver who's coming off a foot injury himself. Now he blew up the combine and he has great size. But Chark, I think, is the safest receiver just based on what he's shown and where he is on his age trajectory as well here. And again, you're not spending a lot on Chark. He's a guy I think you can be bullish on and get pretty good exposure to, and you're still not really dealing with a lot of opportunity costs in this situation.
Yeah, I say I have a ton of exposure to Chark, and I never take him before like pick 150 because he's consistently there, like in the 150s. Maybe not totally consistent. Like I probably have 30% exposure or something, but like I'm well over the field, and I'm not really having to reach for Chark at all. Sometimes he falls even past ADP. Obviously, that's how averages work. But yeah, Chark seems to be a great bet where he's going. Nez says Chark projecting for more receiving yards than Bateman this season is pretty wild and got me onto Chark. Yeah, it's I didn't do any kind of projection for their receiving yards, but Chark definitely somebody that I'm really into as well. Good to see you. Good to see you here, Nez. Another one of the Badge Bros. I just had John Warner Roto Run on a stream on Monday. He's one of the Badge Bros. Nez, another one of the Badge Bros here in chat. Good to see you. So yeah, sounds like we're all kind of on the DJ Chark train. We'll move on, but first, reminder, guys, you can this underdog offer, you can get your first deposit matched up to $100. So you don't have to put $100 in. If you want to put $20 in, it'll become $40 right away. They're going to match it if you use the link in the description. On top of whatever, doubling whatever amount you put in up to $100, you're also going to get access to our best ball package, which that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about Matt's rankings here. You can get access to these rankings if you use the link in the description when you sign up for Underdog. You're going to get an email from us later on with a code to use to get that for free. It's a $40 value. Check it out if you haven't already. I should mention you must be 18 plus to play, or 21 plus in Massachusetts or Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama or Nebraska. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But make sure that you use our link. If you're signing up for Underdog for the first time, you're going to get these great projections along with that first deposit match. And on Underdog, you're not just getting best ball. That's what we're talking about here. I love best ball. I love talking about it, but you also get pick'em prop, you get daily fantasy. They do drafts instead of salary cap. Really interesting way to play. I take advantage of all of these things on Underdog. And of course, we've got the new weekly winners contest, a lot going on Underdog. So if you haven't yet signed up at Underdog, you should do so, and you should use our link so you can get access to our projections as well. All right, Matt, moving on, Jaden Reed, the final receiver that I have listed here that you are bullish on, and I didn't get to the very back of the draft, so I think that there are actually a few more that we can talk about. Maybe I'll just peruse those real quick before we move on to your fades here. But first, Jaden Reed, you have as the wide receiver 68, 145th overall in your rankings, ADP of 169. And I find him interesting because I didn't know what to do with Jaden Reed. I thought about writing him up in when I did or included in my video of wide receiver fades, because I had not been drafting much Jaden Reed at all. And then you and I talked about it a little bit, talked about how much you like him. And I, kind of watched some video, and suddenly I'm in on Jaden Reed, I think, where he is in ADP. So tell me what you like about Jaden Reed.
Yeah, good receiver prospect. He was a fun guy in college too at Michigan State. Dealt with some injuries this last year, had like a crazy situation where he was trying to catch a ball in their non-con and slid into a bench and missed a couple games that affected him late in the season. But prior to that, very explosive receiver, good downfield threat. And the Packers, most importantly, spent some considerable draft capital on him. This is a day 2 pick, a second round pick. And he's now battling a second year player, but a day 3 pick in Romeo Dubes, who was wildly inconsistent last year. It seemed like for every time Romeo Dubes flashed, he would have some boneheaded play that would take him off the field because Rodgers won't deal with that.
Yeah.
I do think he's behind Christian Watson very clearly, but I'm not entirely sure that Romeo Dubes is going to be ahead of him. So similar to like Bateman, Zay Flowers, this is something that will fluctuate a lot as training camp starts and we get news, beat reporters telling us, all right, who's running as the 2, who's running as the 3. But right now we have this projected pretty close. And I think it's just a slight edge towards Jaden Reed, given that the Packers invested so much in him. But we will monitor this closely during training camp.
Okay, so it's another situation that we're going to have to monitor as we go. All right, let's see. I'm just going to some that I did not include in my rankings, but that I'm noticing stand out is you're a little bit higher than the field on Isaiah Hodgins. You have him 158th overall. I'm finding where he is typically drafted. Let's see. He's going 175th overall. So you have Isaiah Hodgins quite a bit ahead of ADP. Is he your clear wide receiver 1 in the Giants receiving room? Is this a situation that you're going to be monitoring closely as well?
I'm a little surprised by that. I have them projected pretty closely here. But yeah, Hodgins slightly ahead. Just to give you we talked about this group a lot before, I think. A little quick synopsis. Paris Campbell, career underachiever. Getting some hype now in OTAs. We'll see if he can put that on the field. He's never been able to do it in the past. Hodgins, he was actually drafted by Buffalo and let go of that by them. But this is a player, decent career at Oregon State, has actually shown some decent efficiency in the NFL. My worry with him is no team's really invested in him. So if he starts slow, could he get, like the Kenny Galladay treatment where he's suddenly on the bench? And I'm not sure. Darius Slayton's a guy that was in the doghouse for a little while. Jalen Hyatt's a rookie for this team, has not had good reviews so far in camp. That's not the end all be all. I'm old enough to remember Jamar Chase. Sterling Shepard and Wandale coming off significant injuries. So I think just from a betting perspective, Hodgins is probably the safest. I do not think he has the highest ceiling, though.
I feel like people were talking about him like towards the end of last year as like he had broken out and was the clear wide receiver 1 for the Giants, and now people seem to have backed off that a little bit. Maybe he wasn't quite the stud that he looked like in a few games for the Giants last year. Definitely, Hodgins is my pretty clear top bet of the Giants receivers as well. But I'm with you. It's a pretty murky situation, hard to. So I think your ranking, the ADP, both are kind of within the range of where I'm drafting Hodgins. Like they're both, I think that's the right range for drafting Hodgins.
And for like the Giants as a whole, I'm ahead on Hodgins because I want these guys. I want whoever the Giants' number 1 receiver is. I want the 2. I want the 3. I love Daniel Jones. Love this offense. Overachieved massively considering their expectations last year. And people are scared because of the uncertainty. Yeah, but
exactly.
I'm going to draft a lot of these. I know you're drafting a ton of these.
Yep.
There's probably going to be some teams that are just stone dead because, the team has Jalen Hyatt and, maybe he ends up as the 5. But then other teams could have Hodgins as the wide receiver 1. And that's what you're really shooting for.
Yep. And you took him at 180 and suddenly he's returning value like a 110, kind of draft pick. So yeah, there's certainly some upside there, even if it's not like, it is certainly a capped upside, I'd say, for Hodgins. But yeah, definitely upside on the ADP. Actually, I skipped over Curtis Samuel. You have 151st overall. He is going 173rd overall. Are you pretty bullish on Curtis Samuel this year?
I like Curtis Samuel. I think the only question here is, this offense is going to stink, but do they have a guy that can really take him off the field? Dax Milne, Diami Brown is probably the biggest threat, but he has not been able to take him off the field in the past. And Diami Brown also doesn't really look like Curtis Samuel. They're 2 entirely different players with entirely different roles. I guess the biggest threat is maybe they play more 2 tight ends, but I don't really see that in the cards either. So I think the role's just pretty secure, honestly.
Yeah, he's just the wide receiver 3. Seems to be. I don't have any strong takes on Sam Howell, but I don't think the quarterback play can get that much worse in Washington than it was last year.
I don't think so either. Sam Howell's cool as a late round guy because he's really mobile, but as far as him as the engine of the offense, I'm not sure.
Yep. And then just one final bullish receiver before we move on. Robert Woods, you have 166th overall in your rankings. He's a guy that you can usually get past pick 200, where is his ADP? It's right at 204. So Robert Woods is somebody that you have ranked quite a bit better than the field. What do you like about Robert Woods?
Yeah, you can basically get all of these Houston receivers not named Dalton Schultz or Nico Collins really late. Woods might be the number 2 here. He's competing with John Mechie. Really happy he's in remission off the cancer diagnosis, but we have no idea what he's going to give us.
Yep.
We then move to day 2 pick Nathaniel Dell, who could play the slot, I suppose, for this team, but wildly undersized receiver, played at the G5 level in college. I like Dell, but there's significant questions with both of those players. I think Woods sort of offers you that Adam Thielen veteran presence, catch the ball underneath. And while it's not sexy, he ends up well ahead of ADP because, I mean, he's going at like pick 200.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's a very similar bet to Adam Thielen, but you can get him more than 60 picks later. So yeah, I'm taking Woods over, or I'm getting a lot more Woods than Thielen. I don't know that I probably wouldn't take him straight up over Thielen, as you said. I think they're fairly similar bets, but he goes so much further, so much later. All right. So those are some wide receivers that you are bullish on relative to the field. Let's talk about some wide receivers that you're bearish on. Starting with, let's start with both of these Philadelphia receivers. So you have AJ Brown as your wide receiver 9. He's going as a wide receiver 6. You have him 13th overall in your rankings. He's going 9th overall. Devontae Smith is the even bigger one. You're taking him wide receiver 21. He's going as a wide receiver 13. You have him 39th overall in your rankings. He's going 22nd overall. So why do you think that you are more bearish on these Philadelphia receivers in the field?
I honestly think that people just want to take Jalen Hurts. And if you want to stack him, you need to spend considerable draft capital. So there's this, I'm going to call it a negative feedback loop where Devontae Smith is being him in particular. I'm okay. I'm actually okay if you want to take AJ Brown high. I'd rather have some other guys more than him, but if you take him at 9th overall, no qualms. With Devontae Smith, I have a lot of qualms. What is the ceiling for Devontae Smith in a run-heavy offense with AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert, assuming they all stay healthy and they're winning as many games as their win total suggests they will? I mean, the ceiling is the question here because other players that are coming off the board behind him, I think, have higher ceilings. DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel. These players are all bona fide number ones with little competition, or at least less competition than what Devontae Smith is facing in Philadelphia. So to me, projection-wise, this doesn't add up. And if you want to take Devontae Smith, I'd have my concerns with it. I think you're basically betting on an AJ Brown injury.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I've drafted, full disclosure, I've drafted a good amount of Devontae Smith for exactly the reason you name. Like I get there, I'm like, usually I've taken a running back with I've taken Christian McCaffrey, I've taken Austin Eckler, and then I see it come back around to me at pick like 21, 22, and I'm like, both Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts are available, and if I can get the stack, it works out well. And you have to take, if you're going to get that stack, you almost always have to take Devontae Smith earlier. And then I kind of shoot for that stack, but I might be reaching in a part of the draft when you really don't want to be reaching that far. Early in the draft, I feel like you're giving up a lot by reaching for players that don't project as well. So honestly, it might be a mistake that I'm guilty of reaching for Devontae Smith because I want to get the stack there for the Eagles, because I'm very bullish on the offense. It's in situations that I haven't already drafted AJ Brown. So yeah, it's an interesting, like, is it worth it to reach that much for that stack possibility? And it sounds like you would not be willing to reach, in the second round for Devontae Smith. Is he somebody that you're never going to take in the second round?
I'm probably not. Like, his receiving prop on Underdog Fantasy is 1,000 yards, 6.5 touchdowns. That's not good enough for a second round pick.
Yeah, no, that is a fair assessment. So even if so let's say you take first overall, you take Jefferson, comes back to you at the 24-25 at the 2-3 turn. Both Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith are available there. You're never taking that combo, do you think?
So I'm getting Hurts and Devontae Smith?
Yeah, if you know they're both there at the turn.
No, never.
Okay, so you're it sounds like you're probably not going to get any Devontae Smith this year. Maybe he drops at some point in the year, but as things stand right now, you rarely see him drop past like pick 30. So it sounds like you're probably not going to get a lot of Devontae Smith.
And I could be wrong. I mean, there's outs to this succeeding. I think he just is way better than AJ Brown. And in that case, you better not have a lot of AJ Brown, or AJ Brown gets hurt.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good call there. I mean, so I've heard some people suggest oh, Devontae Smith could overtake AJ Brown. I think it's pretty unlikely for Devontae Smith to produce better than AJ Brown, considering if both are healthy the full year. But I guess even looking at your projections here, you only have him 22 fantasy points separating them, so it's not like a crazy leap to see Devontae Smith leapfrog AJ Brown. But yeah, seems unlikely if they're both healthy. Yeah, it's an interesting one to think about. Drake London, you have as your wide receiver 30. He's going as a wide receiver 22. You have him ranked 58th overall. He's going 43rd overall. Actually, looking through the rest of these, I think that I am completely in line with you. I think Devontae Smith is the only one that I'm like, oh shit, I've drafted a lot of him, and you're really bearish on him. Most of these
also
are
gotten
players.
more expensive. You probably got him at cheaper prices.
True, he is getting more and more expensive. Drake London, I have not drafted a ton of Drake London. What is it that you're not liking about Drake London here?
This is my favorite one to talk about. And to anyone who's overexposed to Drake London, what is the difference between him and Michael Pittman? Just straight up, what is the difference?
That's a very, very fair question. Do you think Desmond Ridder is better than Anthony Richardson? Do we have any evidence or reason to believe that? I don't know.
Drake London has more target competition with Kyle Pitts there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're just flat out arguing he's more talented. I could see that because we're talking about, top 10 pick, Drake London. But yeah. Michael Pittman, he's still the 33rd overall pick too. So, I mean, we're not talking about some day 3 player. I mean, I just do not understand situationally how Drake London could be going ahead of some of these other players that are just bona fide studs at the position.
Yeah, and I can't argue. I'm right there with you. I have not drafted much Drake London. I don't understand the ADP there. I know the talent's there. Sounds like some people think that he's just a future absolute stud at wide receiver, but just for this year, I just don't see it happening in this exact situation. So yeah, I'm with you on Drake London. And it just comes down, sounds like for you, same as for me, it's just well, look at the players behind him. There's so many that I would rather have than Drake London. So it's just going to end up being a fade, not because I think he's not talented, but because I think that he's not more talented than a lot of the receivers that go behind him, and he's in a worse situation. So it's just it's a hard sell for me on Drake London, and it sounds like it's very similar for you. And then DJ Moore, you have as your wide receiver 31. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 26. You have him 60th overall in the rankings. He's going 48th overall. What do you think it is that makes you bearish on DJ Moore relative to ADP?
So a lot of these receivers at the top, I think I end up being lower on from a projection standpoint. Whereas when you're actually on the clock, I think their ADPs get elevated if they're paired with a stud QB. So similar to the Eagles situation, everyone that drafts the Bears quarterback, I think, is immediately going to be looking at DJ Moore, Justin Fields. Excuse me for the name slip there. But there's no other really clear option in the receiving game that you want on the Bears, which kind of artificially elevates DJ Moore. At the end of the day, this is probably going to be a bottom 3 pass offense in the NFL. Their win expectations still not high. We're still talking about a bottom 2 team in the NFC North. I love Justin Fields. So much of what he did came on the ground. It's hard for me to buy into DJ Moore at this ADP. As much as I love DJ Moore, man, he's a stud. I think he's just going to be a little hamstrung ceiling-wise based on the offense.
I think I tweeted a month or two ago that I think that I might end up with 0 shares of DJ Moore that are not attached to Justin Fields. And I've talked to some other people. I did a live stream with Pat Carrain, where he was kind of telling me well, what you need, people do it wrong. They take Justin Fields first, hoping that DJ Moore will come back around. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I do. Cause I'm much more willing to take a naked Justin Fields than a naked DJ Moore. But I did, he convinced me that I should take DJ Moore if I'm close enough on that turn first. And it has actually worked out that if I take DJ Moore first, then Justin Fields falls back to me. But I really don't want naked DJ Moore. I just think the only situation where DJ Moore pays off this ADP is if Justin Fields has a monster season. So I kind of hate to draft DJ Moore without Justin Fields. I think that he's perfect for that turn, like the 48-49 turn. I think it's the perfect spot if you can get both of them together. Otherwise, yeah, I think I'm not taking any DJ Moore at current ADP. Is that kind of how you feel? Like, would you be willing to, if you get that turn, 48-49 turn, you haven't already drafted quarterback, both DJ Moore and Justin Fields are available there. Do you think you would ever take that combo, or is it still too rich for you to take DJ Moore that early?
Yeah, I've taken that before. I don't think we are different for sure. Not to the point where like DJ Moore's off my draft board. Kind of like Devontae Smith is.
Yeah. Okay. So you are willing to take DJ Moore at ADP in the right circumstances, but in general, you're just not something that you're going to be taking at ADP all that often.
It's basically what you laid out. Yeah.
Yeah. Brandon Ayuk, you have as your wide receiver 35. He's going as a wide receiver 28. You have him 66 overall. He's going 51st overall. Now, you were also, we could have brought him in the conversation when we talked about Debo, because you're pretty high on Debo. You're relatively low on Brandon Ayuk. Why do you think that is?
I didn't change anything with this offense. So current efficiency, same yards per route run. This is where Ayuk pops up. To me, that suggests people are discounting what Debo Samuel's done in.
Oh, did I lose you?
Ayuk is at 1.89. So I think if you're just going based on what these guys have put on the field to this point, this is where you should end up. And if you're any different, you think Debo's going to regress talent-wise and Ayuk's going to take a step forward. I haven't seen anything that points to that.
Yeah, I've seen some people talk about how good Ayuk is. I think at separating, like as a route runner, he's rating really well. So I think people are like betting on Ayuk taking the step forward talent-wise. But yeah, I'm similar to you. I have not drafted a ton of Ayuk at this 51 spot. I've been trying to work him in a little bit more because I don't want to have like 0 shares of Ayuk in case he does take a big step forward, but not somebody that I am super in on either. JSN, you have as your wide receiver 39. He's going as a wide receiver 32. You have him 73rd overall. He's going 63rd overall. Is that just a matter of too many mouths to feed in Seattle, or why do you think you're bearish on him?
Yeah, we're a little ahead on Metcalf and Lockett, if I'm not mistaken. Lockett for sure. With JSN, you're talking about a guy who didn't play football last year. He plays a slot-only role for a team that's actually really high in their 12 personnel usage. I do think that changes this year. You never know with Seattle, though, so I want to be cautious when I say this. They do some pretty weird things with some pretty high draft picks. But at the end of the day, I think you definitely prefer getting Smith and Jigba on the field over whatever combination of Noah Fant and Will Dissly you were previously using. Right. With that said, you still have a guy with a lot of questions, even though he was a first-round pick. The not playing in a while concerns me. He's also competing with Lockett and Metcalf. Lockett, 1 year older, if he takes a major step back, is really the way I think Jackson Smith and Jigba pays off this ADP. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a very, very small difference in efficiency between these two guys last year. They were within 0.03 in terms of their yards per route run. So Lockett not falling off, even if you think he takes a step back. Is it going to be big enough where Smith and Jigba can pay off the ADP? Like some of the other situations, I think you're betting on an injury.
Yep. So you're taking Lockett ahead of JSN is what I'm hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next up, a pretty big gap here, and another player that I was getting like 0 of, and I'm trying to work him in a little bit more because I'm trying to bet on this offense occasionally and try to do the stack. But Elijah Moore, you have as your wide receiver 52. He's going as a wide receiver 44. You have him 105th overall. He's going 87th overall. Why do you think you're lower than the field on Elijah Moore?
He must have risen recently because I don't recall being this low on him. Anyway, looking on the back end, he's actually a player I really like, so this is a bit surprising.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good reason to be honest with you.
All right, so you like Elijah Moore. You like do you like betting on this Cleveland offense in general?
Yeah, for the most part. We have him. Where does the field have him? Wide receiver 44?
Yeah, so the field has Elijah Moore. Yep, wide receiver 44. You have him as 52.
Yeah, that's a bit bullish, I think. I think once you get up there, I mean, you'd be taking him ahead of guys like Rondale Moore, Michael Thomas, Quentin Johnson. I personally don't love that. So I think it comes down to like the alternatives. Like these are some pretty good wide receiver 2 and 3s he ends up being ahead of.
Yeah, so he goes ahead of all of these guys. He goes ahead of Myers, Flowers, Jones, Cortland Sutton. Rondale Moore he goes quite a bit ahead of. He even goes ahead of Michael Thomas. So like relative to, I think he goes right around where Quentin Johnson goes, but a little bit ahead of Michael Thomas. So he's certainly going higher in the ranks, but it's not because you don't like Elijah Moore. You like him. It's just it's hard to compete with all of these other receivers around him, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you want to break it down in terms of alternatives, he is still a receiver on his second team in his rookie contract who fell out of favor in New York. There are questions with him. He's been very good in the small sample he's actually played. But at the end of the day, like we have some pretty dang good receivers and good offenses that come off the board just behind him, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay. And I think that is totally fair. Like I said, like I wasn't getting to much at all, but I've been moving him up my board. Actually, early on in like the pre-draft stuff, I was taking a lot of Elijah Moore when he was going at like pick 120, 130 for whatever reason. He was going really late in drafts, and I was drafting a ton of him. And then more recently, he's just been rising and rising. I think people are more and more bullish on this Cleveland offense in general, and now he's going higher. But I've been trying to take him when I can get him with Deshaun Watson in general. I kind of like doing the Cleveland stack there at that kind of turn. So that's kind of where I have been targeting Elijah Moore more and more. Pardon the more and more. we got Elijah, we got Rondale there. Anyway, moving on to Jameson Williams, who I think it probably just comes down to you're projecting him. He's missing 6 games to start the year. So if you just go like based on projection, he clearly is going too high at where the field is taking him 97th, wide receiver 49. You have him as a wide receiver 58, 120th overall. Do you think there's a case to be made, though, for Jameson Williams that even though like you can't really project him that high, given that he's missing 6 games or whatever it is to start the year, that like in this kind of format where the playoffs are the most important, do you see Jameson Williams as a potential world beater in the playoffs?
He could be. I mean, he's a really hard guy to project at all because he hasn't played.
Yeah, right.
He like had the long touchdown last year, but he didn't do anything other than that. So I mean, guy hasn't played football in over a year, suspended now. Just it really impossible to project. I mean, he could be a league winner for you at some point, but I think he's drafted being kind of towards that. I mean, the one thing I'll say is the games that you should be comfortable with players missing are early in the season, which is why I'm kind of okay taking suspended players. You know, like I want Jameson Williams for the playoff run. So those first 6 weeks, if I can kind of paper mache my way through them with some of my late round receivers, maybe that are healthy at the time, I'm okay with it. But there's just a lot of uncertainty that goes into this situation.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think that all of us remember like the long touchdown or two last year, and we're just thinking, all right, well, he's just going to do that every game when he's healthy. And he like wasn't playing all that much. Like he was playing like 10 snaps, and sometimes with those 10 snaps would turn one of them into a long touchdown. So a lot of us, it looks juicy. We drool over those long touchdowns if he can just play more consistently. But now he's missing these 6 games again. It's I imagine it's a hard place to figure out where to rank Jameson Williams. In general, I haven't been taking him in the top 100, but if he falls past like pick 105, then I'll start taking some Jameson Williams and hoping that he's just going to be somebody who doesn't necessarily get you to the playoffs, but if other players get you to those playoff rounds, then suddenly maybe he starts paying off for you. It's kind of my hope with Jameson Williams. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm lower than the field on Jameson Williams. Haven't drafted a ton. Sky Moore, somebody who has been just getting hyped. Like he's been more and more drafting up to I keep doing the more and more thing when talking about Moors. It's I don't know what I'm doing. It's not intentional. But he's going 103rd now. There have been rumors recently that he is probably going to be playing in the slot in Kansas City, and there have been people pulling out the stats for how good slot receivers have done in Kansas City in general. So I think people are bullish on him, despite how much he let us all down last year. You have him ranked as your wide receiver 61. He's going as wide receiver 50. You have him 129th overall. He's going 103 overall. And it also, I think it might be people try, one of the game stacks that people do have memorized for week 17 is Cincinnati, Kansas City. So I think there's a little bit of he might be pushed up because people are kind of fighting the Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow owners are fighting for Sky Moore, and he's just getting pushed further and further up the board. But are you ever buying him close to pick 100, or are you just waiting to see if he falls to ADP?
No, I'd rather have Kadarius Toney. I'd rather have MVS. I'd rather have Richie James as a last round pick.
Yeah.
Maybe Justin Watson. There's so much that you have to project with Sky Moore. Coming out of Western Michigan, big jump to the NFL, played terribly when given opportunities. Now he's in year 2, so maybe that eases some of those concerns. But I mean, we have a log jam at receiver here. I don't think he's going to walk into like an 85% route share regardless, just because of all those names, unless there's an injury. I mean, like Tony's going to play snaps. MVS is going to play snaps. Richie James, whether you like him or not, is going to play snaps. And Justin Watson, he played more snaps than Sky Moore towards the end of the season. You also have Rashee Rice in there. Some really bad buzz coming out about him, even, like today in OTAs and stuff.
Oh, really? I missed that.
Yeah, he's like throwing up in the middle of drills. He kind of has like the Treylon Burks conditioning issues from last year.
Interesting. That's he's been another one that I've talked about a good bit with. I think Sam Sherman was pretty bullish on Rashee Rice, just saying like, well, he's a round 2 wide receiver. Kansas City took him in the 2nd round, so like they clearly are bullish on him, and he's getting thrown to by Patrick Mahomes. So maybe we're just we're drafting him too late where he's going. So I've started drafting a little bit of Rashee Rice, but he's somebody that I was kind of a full fade on early as well, and it's a tough situation to read. How about Justin Ross? As long as we're talking about Kansas City receivers, that's somebody I did a stream on Fantasy Points where Scott Barrett was really bullish on Justin Ross, just as somebody that I think he thinks is talented, so maybe can earn some targets. Do you see him as competition at all?
Yeah, I think he's talented. I mean, he had a freshman breakout at Clemson, and then injuries derailed him. He still is an undrafted free agent coming out of school, though, so there's nothing invested in him. Missed his entire rookie season. Definitely long odds for him contributing, but if he ends up getting back to that freshman year Clemson form we saw from 5 years ago, sure. But I mean,
yeah.
Ultimately, like at the end of the day with Kansas City, similar to you, it sounds like I want to make bets on these guys and I want pieces of this offense. Sky Moore's a guy I'm not going to have zero Sky Moore, but I'm going to have more Kadarius because he's really cheap and actually talented. I'm going to have more MVS. He played way more than Sky Moore last year, and he doesn't have the same role. There really isn't another player that has MVS's role on this team. And then I'll take bets on the really cheap guys like Richie James to his last round picks.
Yep, and I've been doing the same thing. I've taken maybe I haven't taken a ton of Justin Ross, but I've taken a fair amount of Richie James. Yeah, as you said, like I'm mixing in some Rashee Rice, even though I'm not particularly bullish on him. I'm getting Sky Moore. I wish I had drafted him more where he was going, like in the 120s somewhere, because I think that's kind of where I want to be drafting Sky Moore. Now I'm like, it's hard for me to click that button at like the low 100s. But it is kind of a dead range too. So occasionally I might, just because there's, depending on what's available there, sometimes it's just like completely nobody I want at that position. And I see the comment that Justin Jefferson, so this is Astromine New York, says the best wide receiver is Jefferson. The best fantasy wide receiver is Chase. So you have Jefferson just a little bit ahead of Chase. I'm not going to dispute what you said because you acknowledge that Jefferson is the better receiver. As a Vikings fan, I just have to make sure that you got that part right. As far as fantasy goes, it's pretty close between those two. I'm still taking Jefferson at the 101. I've seen some people say that they're taking Chase instead of Jefferson, but yeah, for me, it's still Jefferson. But again, I'm also a Vikings homer, so I'm going to be watching those games. I want to cheer for Justin Jefferson. Let's see, who else do we have here? I feel like there were a couple that I noticed as I was looking down here. So yeah, you're a little bit below the field on Rashee Rice, but not by any crazy margin there. Alec Pierce, I wrote something up about, or I think I did a video talking about how I'm also low on Alec Pierce. Looks like you are with me. Is that just a matter of like rookie quarterback, probably going to be running a lot? There is going to be a low pass rate, and he's a wide receiver too. Is it just hard to see Alec Pierce paying off there?
Yeah, I think so. Are we sure Josh Downs doesn't beat him out? I'm not sure about that.
Me neither. Yep, so I'm with you there. John Mechie, I think we already went over some potential concerns with John Mechie's health. We just don't really know what to expect there. Tim Patrick is somebody that has been moving up draft boards a little bit. I think he's up to like around pick 180 now. You have him as 212 overall. You just have concerns of Marvin Mims passing him as a wide receiver 3, essentially?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so he's just somebody that, you're a little bit lower on. Yeah, so I think we covered all of the receivers that you are significantly higher or lower on than the field. Did you have anybody else that you want to talk about, Matt?
I don't think so. Trying to glance through it right now, but I think we hit most of them.
Yeah, I think that we covered, all the spots where you're like significantly different than ADP. We even talked about the Giants wide receivers a little bit. I think that's a tough one to nail down that people kind of want to hear about, but I think that everywhere is like, yeah, I mean, this is kind of how I see it, but we can't really give any kind of like, we know the answer to the wide receiver room in New York either. So we covered that well enough. Green checkmark, good to see you. Good afternoon to you as well. We are about to be ending the stream, so you kind of showed up too late to. And if you have any questions, if you see anything in Matt's ranks that you want to talk about, in the next minute or two, we can do that. But otherwise, we're going to close the stream. Guys, reminder, if you have not yet liked the video, please do so. It does help us out a lot if you like our video. And some of you maybe haven't subscribed to this channel yet. We are on the fantasy football channel. We're trying to get more people to subscribe over here because we're putting a lot of content on here. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well. And of course, as I've said a couple times already, sign up for Underdog using our link. You're going to get access to our best ball package along with that first deposit match up to $100. Let me see. Okay, I don't think we have any questions, Matt. So I think we are going to close the stream. Where can people find you? What do you have going on this week as far as content goes?
At Matt_Gajewski on Twitter, doing all things best ball. So you'll see some VODs in the channel. Otherwise, there's articles that correspond with those too. So check out the best ball package.
Yeah, check it out, guys. And it comes, again, if you use the link in the description of this video, it comes with that sign up. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to be doing, throwing some evergreen VODs onto the Fantasy Football channel. Also, check out tonight, I'm going to be doing a live draft on this channel with Jacob Sanderson. It should be fun to do. We're going to do an Underdog Best Ball Mania draft tonight. So check that out as well. That's going to be at 8 Central, 9 Eastern, if you're interested in joining us for a draft. All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, guys, for watching. We will catch you later.